Supervisor meeting this evening, September 16th, 2020. Today to call in for public comment, the number is 646-558-8656, and the meeting ID is 826-6938-5988, followed by the pound or hash sign. Before we start the meeting today, I would like to ask Chair Weiss if I could take a moment to talk about Brian Derby.
Sure, go ahead, Monica.
Thank you. This is very hard for me to talk about, but I wanted to take a moment to remember Brian Derby. He is one of our staff members, one of our key staff members, and he passed away on Monday due to COVID-19. Brian always wanted everybody to have the best experience. He went out of his way. He was very thoughtful. And one thing he was always full of was ideas. He always had ideas to make things better, which I very much appreciate. You know, outside of work, he was very involved. At one point, he was the commissioner of PAA. He was the founder of their scholarship program, or one of the founders of the scholarship program. He was also a founding member of the Knights of Columbus at St. Ignatius. I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge him. He was a very hard worker, and to be honest, it's very unrealistic that we're saying goodbye. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, Monica. And with that, I ask each member of the board and the audience at home just to take a minute of silence and remember him and the staff and his family for this trying time. Thank you, everybody. And welcome to the September 16th meeting of the Board of Supervisors. I call the meeting to order, and please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll now call the roll. Supervisor Bundy.
Here.
Supervisor Grenier.
Here.
Supervisor Lewis.
Here.
Supervisor McCartney.
Present.
And I am here. We have a quorum. And Ms. Ferguson, do we have any updates to our COVID-19 protocols or updated news?
I don't have any report this evening. If there's a question, I'm happy to answer anything I can.
Hearing none, we'll go to public announcements. First, have two proclamations. First is for Mr. Craig Bryson. Let me read the proclamation. I'm happy to do this. Proclamation of the Board of Supervisors of Lower Makefield Township, Bucks County, PA. Thanking Craig Bryson. Whereas the future well-being of the community depends on the involvement, responsibility, and discipline of its residents, and whereas Craig Bryson has been a resident of Lower Makefield Township for over 20 years, and whereas Craig wanted to see his years of experience in planning to give back to Lower Makefield Township, and whereas Craig was appointed to the Planning Commission in 2016, where he contributed his time and expertise, and whereas Craig has now found he can no longer dedicate the time necessary to the Planning Commission and is unable to continue to serve. Now, therefore, on behalf of the residents of Lower Makefield Township, we, the Board of Supervisors, thank Craig Bryson for his years of service to the Lower Makefield Township Planning Commission, adopted this 16th day of September, 2020. Board of Supervisors. And Craig, thank you. I was with you this year as the supervisor liaison. The last 2 years I know were very difficult, but you came through with flying colors, and we're all very appreciative of your work on the board. And secondly, we have a proclamation of the Board of Supervisors of Lower Makefield Township, Bucks County, PA, thanking Eric Yeager. Whereas the future well-being of a community depends on the involvement, responsibility, and discipline of its residents, and whereas Eric Yeager spent most of his life as a resident of Lower Makefield Township, and whereas having a family-owned farm, Eric has great interest in preserving nature and helping local farmers, and whereas Eric was appointed to Farmland Preservation Incorporated in 2017, where he contributed his time and expertise, and whereas Eric has now found that he can no longer dedicate the time necessary to continue to serve on the Farmland Preservation Board. Now, therefore, on behalf of the residents of Lower Makefield, we, the Board of Supervisors, thank Eric Yeager for his years of service to the Lower Makefield Township Farmland Preservation Incorporated, adopted the 16th day of September 2020. Board of Supervisors, signed by Frederick Weiss. John Lewis, you're the supervisor liaison on the Farmland Preservation. Do you have any words for Mr. Yeager?
Yeah, Mr. Yeager was a vital part of the Farmland Preservation Incorporated. He did a lot of the hard, some of the actual physical work in terms of keeping buffers in order and working with vendors to make sure that all the properties were kept in proper condition. And so he'll be greatly missed. And there are actually 2 openings right now in farmland preservation. So if someone in the community like Eric has a passion and making sure that farmland is preserved within Lower Makefield, we'd certainly welcome additional applicants for those 2 openings. Thanks.
Very good. Appreciate it. Other community announcements. It's not written on the agenda, but the Historic Commission is going to have a ceremony on September the 26th at 1:00 p.m. to rededicate gravestones for Civil War veterans at Slate Hill Cemetery. So if you're in the area and you have some time, there'll be a socially distanced ceremony at the cemetery. In other announcements, Penn State Bucks County Master Gardener is holding a free spotted lanternfly Q&A live session via Zoom on Saturday, September 19th at 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock. You can register at the extension.psu.edu/slf/Bucks. And Park and Recreation digital recreation opportunities can be found on the website of the Park and Rec Department. DAC will be holding a styrofoam recycling event on October 31st at 10 a.m. till noon in the township parking lot. And that's all I have officially. I think, Mr. Ferguson, do you have something that you want to add to the community announcements this time?
There you go, Monica. We're still there. And go ahead.
Okay, I actually just wanted to share a little bit of an update on the Memorial Park project where Porous Pave donated all the material to pave the park. I have a couple slides to show you as pictures of the progress. So if I could just open that up real quick and I'll share you some pictures and okay. Okay, so this is what that you saw earlier when Ellen presented. These are what the paths looked like before Porous Pave came in and made their donation. They were in really bad condition. So Porous Pave was here for the last week after we did some prep work all summer long. We had the tech school in cleaning up the pathways and making everything nice. Initially, the tech school was going to actually learn how to lay the Porous Pave, but the project took a little longer because of humidity. We couldn't lay it down while they were here. So Porous Pave employees came together and donated their time. There were about 15 employees that came, and they helped lay the whole track over the last 2 days. So by the end of this week, it'll be walkable and ready for everybody to go out and enjoy, maybe even tomorrow. So this is what it looks like. It's a rubberized pathway. I was there last night just checking it out and walking the ground, so it's dark in the picture. This is what it looks like in the light. So at nighttime, it looks almost black. During the day, it's more of a red color. Depending upon what the sun is shining, it kind of changes color. This is in the main entrance area. If you can see, we did the multicolor look, the blue and the gray change. I have to say this cleanup is so significant. It looks so nice, and I'm so grateful for the donation and the donated time. Unpaid, they came out here and did this. So I'm very grateful for everything that they've done and all that Ellen was able to do to pull this off. I couldn't say that I'm more grateful. So please, this weekend, if you have some time, walk the new paths and see what they did.
Looks great, Monica.
Yes. Thank you very much, Monica, and please relay our thanks to Ellen, all the volunteers that made this a reality. Okay, Monica, is there anybody from the public that has an announcement to make?
No community announcements.
Good, okay. We'll now go to item number 6 and consider approval of the minutes of August 31st, 2020.
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Mr. Lewis seconds.
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
0. Minutes are approved. Item number 7, Treasurer's Report. Ms. Bundy?
Kurt, do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go first?
Sure, I'll go. So you have the warrants list, and if you'll excuse me, I still call it a bills list, not a warrants list, but the warrant list that you have. The amount that Supervisor Lundy will read is larger than normal. And I just wanted to put a little context into it if I could. There are several expenses in there that are one-time expenses. We have a transfer to the ambulance, to the ambulance squad, which is the millage that we've assessed. This is the time of the year that we give the donation. That's for $205,000. We have the donation that we make, not the donation. We have the tax that we collect, and this is the point in time that we also send our contributions to the 2 fire departments. That's $362,000 and change. Then you'll notice a manual wire in there for $315,000. Those are for the leaf trailers that we got the grant for that we have to pay up front. You'll also notice when Supervisor Blundy reads the transfer amounts, you'll see that we used $306,416 to cover that expense from the bond fund. We can use the bond fund when it is for a capital expense of that sort, but it will be reimbursed and put back into the bond fund. So when the grant money comes back in, hopefully in 6 to 8 weeks, you'll be seeing that you'll be approving a transfer that comes back into the bond fund for that same amount of money. But those, back to the warrants list, those couple of items that I mentioned, those one-time expenses, amount to about $800,000 and change of the warrants list before you.
Thank you. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to consider approval of the warrants list from September 8th, 2020 in the amount of $1,423,856.07.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Mr. Lewis seconds. Any discussion?
Fred, can I ask one question that's related? Kurt, you mentioned the payments to the rescue squad that we typically do. I'm wondering, they recently advertised that they're selling one of their, I think it was one of their fire trucks. When they do that, are we at all involved in that transaction in any way? Or is that completely separate and they get whatever they get for it and use that for themselves, I would think?
That's correct. So we provide tax money to them. They purchase the assets that they believe are needed. So those would be owned and maintained by them. So that would, yes. We do instances where with the fire company, we bought a fire truck for the fire company a couple of years ago, and that was an enormous expense. That was $700 and some thousand. So they traded a truck or sold a truck as part of that they applied to the amount. So while we didn't get money back from the fire company, it lowered the amount that we agreed to pay for that truck 2.5 years ago.
Which makes sense. Thanks. I just want to make sure I was clear on that.
And they're actually really well renowned for the way they keep their trucks. They get amazing trade-ins or sales for their equipment, and people actually look for their trucks compared to other municipalities, so fire companies.
Any other discussion? Monica, is there any public comment on this issue?
No public comment.
Hearing no further comment, call the question. All those in favor of these expenses signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to consider approval of the August interfund transfers in the amount of $988,864.55.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Grenier seconds. Any discussion? Monica, is there any public comment on the transfers?
No public comment.
Hearing no further comment, all those in favor of the transfers signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you very much. Item 8, sewage process update. Mr. Trello?
Yes, just briefly, and I'll turn some of the details over to Mr. Ferguson. As part of the process for the sewer sale, actually going back to when the process started, one of the things that was performed, one of the tasks that was performed was to assemble all the assets in terms of the location, the description, also liabilities, and the obligations that the system has. And that was then included in an overall document that's called an asset purchase agreement, which is also referred to as an APA. All the bidders had that document. In fact, every single one of them in their bids, I'm just picking out language from one, said the undersigned proposer hereby unconditionally and irrevocably offers to enter into the asset purchase agreement, the APA, for identified sewer facilities owned and operated by Lower Makefield. And then there's some other language, but so they all had that information beforehand. So the basic agreement, which was drafted by a number of people in concert with one another, Mr. Wyatt, certainly Mr. Scherer, our office had some involvement. My partner, Barbara Kirk, was involved. Mr. Wyatt's associate, Ms. Norcross, and it certainly was reviewed by township staff and others. So this was all assembled and made available to the potential bidders weeks in advance of their submission. What is now ensued is since the, and by the way, there's no requirement by the township to certainly modify the agreement. More importantly, once you hear the details, there's no obligation by Aqua to do this. I will emphasize that what is being proposed tonight is the same value within the asset purchase agreement overall for the system sale, but what is being proposed is a modified payment schedule, which Mr. Ferguson can now, I think, describe in detail for everybody. Did I forget anything, Mr. Ferguson? Okay.
No, thanks, Dave. So following the selection of Aqua and having had several follow-up conversations with PFM and Mr. Wyatt, as you all know, I have been monitoring our financial situation for the end of the year related to COVID and even some of the things that I've discussed over the last couple of years. The issue that we have, at least Pat as it currently stood, was even if the closing is finalized and it's a year from now, we're faced with all of the measures for the next year, particularly the 2021 budget that we would have to address. And it was at that time that I asked the team, I'd like to pursue as part of the transaction, a down payment on the system, and came up, and we can talk briefly about how I got there, but with a $3 million down payment on the system. Not $3 million in addition to the 53 million would be part of the transaction. So the team, particularly Scott and Tom, went and spent some intense discussions and got agreement on that. So what I'd like to do, I did have in my report this week some details with that, but while the budget is still maybe 6 weeks or so away, there were issues with this year's budget that I've talked about regarding the structural deficit that we have on a year-to-year basis, where our fund balance number, even though it's better than was originally anticipated in the spring, still would require us to address next year. So Monica, can you pull up my first slide, please?
Yes, we'll bring them right up.
Thank you. So again, I'm giving the first assumption here, obviously. Oh, there we go. So the $3 million that was successfully negotiated was with one caveat, which is the second bullet item there. In the asset purchase agreement, it was assumed that Aqua would pay up to $70,000 in reimbursements for engineering and legal fees. That was originally discussed. So in the end, on the surface, you're saying, well, we're giving up $70,000, right, in exchange for $3 million. But when we look at the impact of the $3 million, it doesn't come out, and actually, we actually end up being better off. And I'd like to start with the first slide, please, Monica, the second slide, excuse me. So as I've said, the anticipation is that we'll end this year with approximately $700,000 to $800,000, which is about a 5% fund balance. As I have talked about on several occasions, we were downgraded on our bonds about a year or so ago. And Moody's evaluation of having a AA bond rating to maintain it are sustained 30% plus fund balances to keep that rating. So a $3 million down payment would translate, it's simple math, to $3.7 to $3.8 million at the end of this year, which does hit us in this threshold. Now, that's not sustained at this point. That's obviously established, but I think it's a very positive first step. I have a Moody's hearing that's coming up as far as beginning to show our fund balances that are in that range to hopefully at least to start take the negative outlook off of the township's current financial standing with bond rating agencies. Can you go to the next slide, please? So one of the things that I want to talk about is one of the things that we'd be talking about during the budget this year would be the need for a tax anticipation note. Our tax structure is that we're primarily and overwhelmingly driven by property taxes. So the question then ends up becoming, when does revenue come in and how much do we have to sustain ourselves while we're waiting for that? So it would have been anticipated that I would be presenting to the board a $2.5 million tax anticipation note. Again, that's a one-year loan that we pay back, and it's usually set at the last day of the year that you pay that back. So if, with Scott Shearer's help from PFM, and I have more detail in my report, so if you make several assumptions, there's legal costs with the filing, the interest itself on the TAN, then obviously we would net out, we'd get interest on that $2.5 million. So in the end, absent of the $3 million deposit, we would be going for a tax anticipation note, and the cost of that netted out would be $65,000. Can you go to the next slide, please? So this is now going to get back to this fund balance issue in part. So if we are running a structural deficit, as I've talked about in previous meetings, of $1 million plus, and we're starting the year with $700,000, to keep a 5% fund balance, that would translate to the need for an approximate 2 to 3 mil tax increase for next year. That increase, and I just put that range for a $400,000 home, would be somewhere between $87 and $131 per homeowner in the township. However, there's also a direct cost as you all know, we're near the top of our, near the ceiling for our millage at 13.88, and the maximum millage is 14 in the general fund, would be an estimated direct cost for legal filings associated with that for $5,000. Can you go to the next slide, please? So the $70,000, if we want to talk about that, right? We're talking here in the end, where are we in the scope of things as far as giving that back as part of the transaction? $3 million in down payment for a year. And I put in an interest rate that's even slightly lower than what we have right now of 0.5% would generate $15,000 in interest. The fact that we wouldn't have to go for a tax anticipation note, the cost of $65,000, and the offset of not having to go to court and have our solicitor's office go to request going above the state cap would be a $5,000 savings. So in the end, the benefit of that then translates to $85,000. So in the end, essentially giving up $70,000 in reimbursables is offset to the benefit of the taxpayers by $15,000. So the deal, I think, that was negotiated by the team here was phenomenal, where quite honestly, when all is said and done, we end up making out $15,000 on the give back that we give to get $3 million. The $3 million deposit would have, has a provision in there that would be provided to the township by December 15th, which could then be incorporated into our year-end financials and then would affect the fund balance and the verifications that we would need to give to Moody's this year as part of our review. Just to remind the board, we now have an annual review from Moody's for the reasons we discussed before, having been flagged that they keep a close eye on us. They, in fact, Moody's called and requested an unannounced meeting in May because of our status and because of COVID that was going on with finances. And then we'll follow up with this one. So that's the entirety of what I have regarding the financial component of this and the change. And I'm not sure if there's any questions. I'm happy to answer them. I've also asked, I have the PFM team and I have Tom Wyatt available as well. You can pull those slides down, Monica. Thank you.
Fred, you're on mute.
Oh, thank you. At this point, I guess if somebody would be so nice as to read the motion on item number 8. And we can start a discussion.
I'd like to make a motion to reapprove, reauthorize, and ratify the asset purchase agreement, otherwise known as an APA, to include a $3 million deposit payable in December of 2020 and waive the provision related to reimbursement of up to $70,000 in legal and engineering fees.
So you're a second? I'll second the motion. Okay, any discussion?
Can I say something very quickly?
Sure.
All I wanted to say, and I'll step back again, is per the advice of the solicitor, similar to the sewer sale discussion, I will be recusing myself for similar reasons, and I will go off video now. Thank you, Fred.
Okay, Dan, no problem. Kurt, let me just, so in getting this $3 million, I understand the 85, the $15,000 net benefit. I just want to make it clear, will we have to raise taxes next year with this $3 million deposit?
No.
Okay, so not only do we make an extra $15,000, probably won't have to raise taxes at all next year.
We definitely won't.
Thank you. So Instead of probably, it will be definitely. All right, that's all I need to know. Thank you very much. Any other members of the board? Mr. Lewis?
Yeah, this is the first time I'm seeing the agreement. So I'm kind of disappointed that I hadn't got it sooner and seen some of the markup prior. So got a couple quick questions, not too many. The first one's on Schedule 5.11. Aqua does not have any litigation pending on that. And I guess my quick question is, the reason that the County of Delaware versus Delcora was left out is because Aqua is not currently named a defendant, correct?
But there's two, if I might, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, thank you for that question, and thank you for your thorough review. There's two reasons. One, that suit is immaterial to Aqua as a firm and immaterial to this transaction. But more importantly, and directly to the point of why I said on that schedule, is Aqua is not a defendant in that case.
That's what I was asking. Yeah, the agreement does not provide a disclosure of litigation involving the seller. Is the buyer aware of current litigation involving the sale specifically? And if not, should we disclose it in the APA?
Yes, I might add, and you might not have known, I'm not sure, when we were in the courthouse together, but a representative from Aqua sat in the courtroom for the entire day. So they're very well aware, and we have an anti-sandbagging provision in the APA. So it doesn't necessarily need to be on a schedule if Aqua certainly do.
Right. On Schedule A, the Stackhouse pump station is omitted, although the map indicates a Stackhouse ejector station. Is there a reason why the Stackhouse pump station was omitted from Schedule A?
Can I answer that?
Go ahead.
So in the end, the listing of things, Stackhouse, we've acquired an easement, what have you, those schedules will be adjusted all the way up until the closing and then up until the next year. So this is the snapshot at the time that will continue to be finalized for the next year. Essentially, that's correct, Tom, right?
Yes, sir.
So does that mean we're not authorizing final approval, or the schedules will get amended between now?
The schedules get amended because, in fact, Mr. Wyatt and I had a meeting, conference with the Aqua attorneys Monday
Yes,
to discuss, and this is part of the normal process for any of these sales, the identifying and certifying basically the assets. And I think what you see is probably 90 to 95% accurate, but we actually, until we know there's a sale, nobody wants to include have the time and expense of an abstractor, but an abstractor will be retained to actually go out and presumably with the help of Mr. Hucklebridge and probably Mr. Ebert, and help identify all those assets to firm that up before the final settlement, assuming PUC approval.
Now,
Just
I noticed I went through the agreement. It appears to make no requirements on the seller to continue existing capital projects. Is that correct, or am I missing something in the APA?
Well, there might be a wrinkle in there that perhaps you didn't consider, and that is anything that's required as in the 537 plan, we need to continue on with. And there's a covenant in, I think it's 901, perhaps 903, and I apologize, I don't have it in front of me, but we're required to operate in the ordinary course from the time of signing until closing. And so in the ordinary course would encompass O&M and ongoing capital. And to, if I might, Mr. Young, back up and first of all, agree with Mr. Truelove's point. And secondly, let you know that there's provision in the APA, and we anticipate in the APA that there'll be a need to update the schedules. So periodically, as we move toward closing, we can update the schedules to make sure they're complete and intact on an ongoing basis.
Okay, but there's no specific requirements on specific capital projects, which is the question then. It's just existing O&M and anything required by 537.
Correct.
Okay. In section 8.04, if the township of Lower Makefield sued by another potential acquirer or other third party, we are responsible for any legal fees and damages. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I know I'd asked, I wondered, you know, if there was any way we could get indemnification of that. I read the indemnification section pretty carefully. And at that time I was kind of shut down. I wondered, you know, they're not even the highest bidder. Would it be unreasonable for them to protect us for that sort of circumstance?
It would be unprecedented for a buyer to indemnify a seller for improperly running a bid process. And I would imagine it's a non-starter.
Okay. In section 15.10, both parties are waiving trial by jury. Why is that in Lower Makefield's best interest?
Yeah, I think first of all, we'll be in a court in Bucks County, and I think that the time and expense of the trial by jury is beneficial to both parties. I think reasonable people could argue about that, but when you're negotiating a transaction as complex and as large as a $53 million APA, sometimes there's some give and take on certain individual provisions.
Okay. In Schedule 12.01B, what specifically has to be amended with the MMA agreement?
It's a good question. I think as we sit here, it's not exactly clear. And we had anticipatory and due diligence discussions with each of the bidders about the MMA agreement, making sure they understood it, making sure they understood our perspective. Maybe nothing, Mr. Young, is the answer, or Mr. Lewis, sorry. But we want to leave the door open to make sure that we're having open communications with the MMA and the winning bidder, such that at the time of closing, the appropriate contract is in the buyer's hands. But frankly, maybe nothing's happening.
Have we talked to MMA specifically about amendments to the agreement at all?
I have not.
Okay. Has anyone else?
I have not.
Okay. Now, quick question. House Bill 2597 and 2746. Are you aware of those, Mr. Wyatt?
Could you remind me what they are? Is that was
Yeah.
one of those
If they're impacted, yeah. If they're enacted, they would impact this asset purchase agreement. Both of them require a ratepayer referendum, and one has a 60-day effective date. So should those pass quickly, I know there was hearings this week on 2597, how would that affect the agreement?
Well, I'd hate to speculate here in a public meeting about whether or not a certain bill will be passed and signed into law. Or, you know, I've been following that bill closely, as you might imagine, but, you know, it would be total speculation. But if a law is passed that negatively impacts this transaction, then we will forthrightly and transparently deal with the consequences of that new law and frankly, abide by it.
Yeah. One last was any board member notified of the township's intent to receive a structured upfront payment? I guess because that was a change in policy and no one had mentioned until I saw the revised APA.
I didn't notify the board of that. That was a discussion we had that's in and of itself almost unprecedented. So I had asked the team to go and see if that could be negotiated as part of finalizing the APA, which staff was empowered to do. They came back and said they're willing to do a $3 million deposit. And instead of just executing the APA, really, I think at least that we were empowered to do, we stopped and brought that back to the board to present that as an opportunity.
Yeah, I guess my concern is no board member had a chance to provide any markup or any comments on the agreement, as far as I understand it, until Monday. Is that correct?
That is correct. The APA I gave the APA went out on Friday, but the APA is the board authorized us to finalize, and we did finalize it. However, because there was a change that was not contemplated being a deposit, we brought the full agreement back for you all to see, and had the language in there that included the $3 million.
So yeah, I can certainly appreciate the value of that. I guess my concern is the board didn't authorize staff to do that. And it seems like there's a disconnect in terms of what we never had a chance to review the APA is my concern.
Actually, one of the motions, I forget at which meeting, did authorize the staff to, I forget the language, but to take all necessary and appropriate steps to effectuate the sale and execute documents.
And I would stand corrected if that That was in fact, the motion.
And I wish I.
That's in the resolution. The resolution was to finalize all documents.
Right.
And there was a staff discussion, just in the interest of following through in the discussion. There was a staff discussion in the end, and a legal discussion of legally, could we just finalize this deal, which we had authorization to do in that resolution, because even the offset of the $70,000, there was no increased cost. Legally, the answer was yes, we could have done that. However, understanding that this has had a number of nuances with it, staff all concluded, and the attorneys, that it was appropriate to bring this back because it was not contemplated or discussed with the board. So I had taken the initiative myself to ask staff to see if we could negotiate a $3 million upfront payment. That was the intent, to bring that back to all of you. I did not seek permission to do that. Seeing that in the end, the original discussion was, let's just see if they will do it. They came back with this nuance of the $70,000, waiving of the $70,000 that we believe legitimately are offset, but we still brought it back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
McCartney?
Yeah, I just had a question for Tom or Scott, I guess. What's the downside to doing this from a transactional standpoint or from a township standpoint? Is there any downside to it?
I'll let Scott talk to any financial downside, and then maybe I'll react to any contractual downside.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's any downside. I mean, Kurt did mention that if the transaction would not close, that the loan would need to be paid back within 90 days. So at that point in time, the township could either use, the funds on hand from that deposit to pay it off, or use other surplus monies or borrow money to do that. So again, I don't know if it's a downside. I'd say it's a risk, but that was one of the things that Kurt had mentioned. But otherwise, no, I see no downside, given the points that were mentioned before about the net benefit, the ability to eliminate the need for a tax increase for the upcoming budget year. I think those all outweigh that risk.
And Tom, before
McCartney, if I could just add one thing to that about repayment. So if that would happen, I'll try to get more in the weeds here. We would have a majority of that money to give immediately back. If we needed to go for a short-term loan, I want to make this clear. There's not an intent to take that $3 million and spend it. The goal is to take that $3 million, set as much of it aside as we can, because as I had mentioned, we would need a tax anticipation note to assist early in the year with bill payment. So in the end, if it didn't close and we had to repay that back, like Scott said, we may have to take a loan. I'll frame that differently. We would be taking a provision similar to a tax anticipation note that we would have to do anyways at the beginning of this year to get that back. And then in the end, if the deal didn't close, much like we'd be looking at a tax increase this year, we'd be looking at a tax increase then next year.
Okay. And then how about from a contractual standpoint, Tom?
Yeah, and thank you for the question. And from my perspective, the biggest risk is probably, with Aqua, for them to make a deposit of this size in this transaction is unique. It's not unprecedented, but it's unique. And so I think that the only risk that we would run into contractually is if we weren't cooperating with Aqua along the way and making sure that we got to the PUC as well as we can, as quickly as we can. And so that's really the only risk for us, is that we fail to cooperate, and they say that we're in violation of the agreement. But frankly, the team that you've compiled is going to do the work, and we're going to do it in an orderly fashion. And I don't think that there'll be any consequences.
Okay. That was it. Thank you.
Ms. McCartney? Ms. Bundy?
Yeah, so Kurt, if we could go back, since we've kind of talked about why we're amending the APA or to what extent this language affects the APA. Can you help me understand the financial picture a little bit deeper? So in other words, at the end of the year, without this, and I know you have to estimate on some level, but what is the projected amount in our bank account at the end of the year?
Well, I want to make sure I'm clear. So we have a lot of different accounts, as everyone knows. Certain monies that are dedicated to certain things, state money, what have you.
Right.
In the general fund, which is typically when you hear any municipality talk about their money situation, that's almost always what they're referring to. So the estimate, and again, as you all know, I've recently updated the year-end projection. I have generally said that we would end the year with $700,000 to $800,000. Somewhere in that range, we might do slightly better, slightly worse, but that's the range. So if we end 2020 with that amount of money, as I've talked about in the past, we have a structural deficit in the township on a year-to-year basis of about $1 million to $1.2 million every year. So if we're starting the year with only 700,000 and 2021 all by itself is 1.2 million short, we would see that we would not have enough money to make it through the year. And if the minimum goal that we have is to end the year with a 5% fund balance, we would need somewhere between 1.1 and 1.5 million dollars in additional money next year to land us at a 5% fund balance. So in the end, we end the year with 700,000 or 750,000, and our 2021 operations and keeping the lights on and everything were $1 million bucks or so short just in 2021. So I don't know if that answered it or not. It in the end, it has to do with the thing we've talked about for several years, is there was a lot of support that was previously given to the general fund from other funds. And if you'll recall, it was back in late 2018 when we did all of those big transfers to pay all those funds back that had those negative balances because the money was gone. So because there's not money sitting in those other accounts, even to go back to that approach to financial management, there's not money there to do it any longer. We've moved it around and now we're sort of, we know exactly where we are in all of these funds. So absent the $3 million, we would be faced with that shortfall for next year.
And the $3 million is the deposit on the sale that ultimately, theoretically, will be approved. But should it not be, to the points made by PFM earlier, we would be obligated to repay those funds back within a 90-day window. So that's why you brought up the interest rate, that 0.5, I think that's what you said, putting the money there so that should that happen, we would have the money to repay.
We will. So the thing is remember this, if we don't have enough money, forget the 3 million, to sustain ourselves through April and May when tax dollars come in, we'll essentially, in theory, be dipping into some of that money. Now, if the deal didn't close by August or September, presumably we would have recouped some of that because the tax money would have come in. Might it be possible that we would have to do a short-term loan the way Scott had talked about? I call that a sort of a tax anticipation equivalent of somewhere between $500,000 or so, possibly. But we would then have to financially plan around what the tax structure for the following year would be to make up for that, to offset for that. So I don't want that to be misconstrued, because in the end, if we would not wish to have this $3 million deposit, we're having this discussion in a month about doing this.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Any other board comments?
If not, Dr. Weiss, just to kind of clarify, in the minutes of August 12th, page 71 of 72, is the language that is from the resolution itself authorizing the sale. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Township of Lower Makefield Board of Supervisors authorizes PFM the township staff, special regulatory counsel, the township solicitor, and township engineer and related consultants to take all steps necessary to effectuate the award of bid, execute, deliver, and perform the asset purchase agreement and all related agreements and documents necessary to close the sale transactions in an efficient and expeditious manner, and to proceed with all necessary regulatory and related submissions necessary to effectuate the sale. So I just wanted to clarify that. That was clearly stated as the resolution in the minutes of the meeting of August 12th, which were approved, I think, last meeting, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you, Mr. Truitt. Monica, is there any public comment?
Yes, Robert Abrams is on the line.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Abrams, give your name, address, and make your comment.
Robert Abrams, 652 Teach Drive. Question on the interest rate here. We're discussing 0.005, I believe, which is 1/2 of 1%. Is that correct or incorrect?
That's correct.
Okay, so we're at 1/2 of 1%. Let's go back to the cell tower. The constituency was promised $50,000 a year and 2.5% interest, which we are now at 0.5%. And you want to borrow against the future of this community? Is there something seriously wrong with you people?
I'm sorry.
You want to take $3 million. You don't start with me, Mr. Ferguson, because you're borrowing this community into oblivion. And that's the way it's going. Every
not
time we
alone.
turn
It's not
around,
alone.
every time we turn around, we're
Mr. Abrams, it's not a loan. It's we're getting $3 million up front of the $53 million.
That's correct.
And we'll be getting 0.5% estimated on that money.
Mr. Abrams, you're muted. If you could press *6 to re-enter.
I heard what you said the first time, and I heard what you said again with the cell tower. And neither one of them are going to come to fruition, because if your deal doesn't go through, it's going to be up to this community to come up with $3 million in 90 days, and it's $3 million you don't have.
I'm sorry.
And you're not going to have. Okay? Now you're threatening, you're threatening, this is my time. You're threatening tax increases, you're threatening tax increases, but you're never looking back and saying, how much money am I wasting? How much money am I promising this community that never comes to fruition? You already sold off the whole historical value of the community, so you can expect me to look for a property tax decrease, because that's the way it's going. And to show you what you're promising the community, I have a buddy that rents Hedgerow Heacock Meadows. They're getting $1,500 out. They're struggling to get $1,500 for 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a garage. And you're telling us this new developer is going to get $1,900 for 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and park in the street and scrape the ice off your windshield and shovel the snow from your door. I mean, it's getting a little old here, what the public needs to listen to, because it's a bunch of garbage. Now get yourselves together. This proposal should have been put up to the public so the public could digest it. Not, here you go, we'll throw it at your face, we'll take a quick 3-2 or a 3-1 vote, and too bad, you're out. If it doesn't work out, too bad, you pay for it. Mr. Ferguson, you need to go buy some property around here so that you got some skin in the game. Because all you're doing is borrowing us into a hole that you're never going to be able to dig out of. And one of the adages you ought to start listening to is, when you're in a hole and you can't get out, stop digging.
Time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abrams.
Fred, I'm sorry. Because I got some calls today similar to this, I feel the need to respond.
Go ahead, sir.
You all will have a budget before you in 6 weeks or so. The intent of this money is to not go, at least as far as the manager's budget. The board is obviously free and approves the final budget. This is not a loan. There's a $53 million agreement for the system that Aqua has agreed to provide $3 million up front. The $3 million up front objectively helps the township in several areas, including the Moody's review of the township that is forthcoming, that I'm going to say it, I promise you, and I said this before, if we're showing a 5% fund balance number at the end of this year, and we are presenting a 2 to 3 mil tax increase for next year, which would be what would be needed to maintain a 5% fund balance, I promise you we will be downgraded on the bonds. That's first. Second, the 0.5%, regardless of was a realistic presentation of the interest rate. So in the end, we picked actually an interest rate slightly lower than we currently have as an objective analysis in terms of offsetting the $70,000. So the goal here in the end isn't that we're going to be borrowing money, loaning money. It's that we are trying to be extraordinarily thorough in the review to contemplate every scenario, including that the sale doesn't go through and we'd be responsible for paying that money back. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. Any other public comment, Monica?
No further public comment.
Okay.
Chairman Weiss, I just have one quick question, and this might be to Tom Wyatt. Sorry, Tom, if I'm picking on you again. What's the risk or the chances that the sale won't go through and we're going to have to repay the $3 million?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it's highly unlikely. And so you can never predict. A condition to closing of this transaction is to get an application before the PUC and accepted by the PUC. And I don't in any way mean to diminish that effort. But one of the requirements is to prove that there are substantial public benefits for the sale. And the arguments that we'll be making in our testimony and that Aqua will be presenting in its testimony will be well-tread, a well-tread path. All of the things that we'll be arguing have been approved for many, many, many cases. Improved customer service, ensuring that the capital program it can go forward. You know, all of the things that we'll say are well trod out in the PUC, and I feel very confident that it will be accepted. It won't be easy, but it will probably get through.
And what's the timeline on that process again?
Yeah, it's a good opportunity for me to refresh the board's recollection. So we'll spend the next few months, let's assume we get a positive vote tonight, we'll spend the next few months getting the appraisals done on the system, and Aqua will be doing a tremendous amount of work to get the application together, and that application will stand 3 to 4 feet off the ground. It's a pretty intense piece of work. We'll get that to the PUC, and then from there, it'll take somewhere between 9 to 12 months to get to approval.
And Kurt, just to, based on that timeline, I think I lost you. There you are. Based on that timeline, does that put us in a better position, not only for 2021, but for 2022 and 2023 financially? Oh, you're on mute.
Go ahead, James.
Oh, it's okay. So I was going to say, based on the timeline that that Tom just laid out, does that put us in a better financial situation for 2021, 2022, and 2023?
No, I think it's fine. I think it's what we had. I think it's what we've been anticipating. You know, we've talked all along about, you know, a year-long time frame or so to close. I think we've anticipated that. So, I mean, I'll continue to run the string all the way out. In the end, is if it doesn't close, we're running into, you know, not early in the year, presumably, but later in the year. So even if we have to repay it, the timing is ideal because we would have collected tax money. We're not going to spend all of that $3 million. It's meant to boost the fund balance in part. So I think from a financial perspective, I think it plays exactly the way we had anticipated.
Okay, thanks.
Any other further board comments? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed? 1. Motion passes 3-1. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chulov, do I have to officially say
3-1-1.
abstain? I just want to make sure it's on the record. Thank you.
You don't have to, but I did, the record should know the vote would be 3-1 with your abstention noted. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, board.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your help.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Now we'll go to item 9, engineers report. Mr. Puckle.
Yes, supervisors, you have in your pocket my report. I have 3 quick updates to that that have occurred this week that I feel I should bring to your attention prior to getting to the agenda items here. First one is Dobry Road reconstruction has started. That began today. Again, they anticipate approximately 2 weeks for that work, and that would be from Oxford Valley Road down to the entrance driveway to the Caddis development. So about halfway down is the 2 weeks of work, and they are routing traffic through the site. We had a site walkthrough last Friday with the township traffic engineer and the developer and township staff to outline the temporary traffic control measures, and so they've begun work today. We received yesterday the land development applications, preliminary and final, for the Prickett Preserve and for the PA American Water pump station, which upgrades. This would be on Oxford Valley Road, or basically behind the community center over by the water tower across the street from the township building. So we will be working diligently on those plan reviews. And also we met with the contractor for the pool complex, who had put in the perimeter drain around the Olympic pool 2 years ago for pool repairs that are needed. There's some cracking on the deck. There's some spalling, meaning concrete chipping off the surface of the concrete deck, which they're going to repair within the next couple of weeks. And I will remind the board that as part of the maintenance, we had a 5-year maintenance plan that is completely paid for by the contractor. So all of this work is going to be completed under that maintenance plan, and therefore I've confirmed that no cost to the township. So having said that, I'll move right into the first agenda item. If you'll remember.
Dr. Weiss, could I ask a quick question of the engineer before he gets into the agenda items, just on his report?
Sure.
Quick on the first, I think it was the first item, but the sort of pass-through traffic at Caddis, that's just starting, right?
It is.
Okay. So, and obviously we know that the neighbors are concerned. So I'm wondering, please just keep an eye on that. In general statement, keep an eye on that, because we'll all get phone calls and emails if something goes wrong, and we'll be calling Mr. Ferguson. He knows that.
But Dan, just so you're aware as well, we did require them, and they did submit a traffic control plan.
Right.
In the end, if something comes up, we have something. I've been in places before where someone will say they're going to do something, and then people forget down below. People who are administering us. We have an official plan that if something is awry, we can pull right back up Andy or Jim Majewski or whatever and hold them to it. We wouldn't allow them to go forward until they gave that to us on a plan to show it. So kudos to Andy and Jim for holding them to that standard before we'd approve them.
In addition, they did notify every resident or user on Dobry Road of the work and the schedule and how it was going to begin. So they put flyers in everyone's door in advance of that.
Good. And the neighbors that back up to Caddis, I'm assuming they're all aware as well. The Regency folks that back up, I forget what road they all live on, but that back up.
Well, yeah, I don't know that the specific door flyers went into their doors, but yes, we've given them notification.
They're aware. They don't need flyers per se, as long as they're aware. Related to that I know we've gotten some concerns about Caddis, that their current light situation. I know you, I think you've been out there, Jim's been out there, Kurt, you've been dealing with it. Is there any analysis, or are we still working through it?
Well, the initial analysis that we completed was taking light level readings at the property lines. And they indicated that the light levels were 0. So there was 0 projection of light. Now that's, a projection of light is different than light observance, as I've explained a couple weeks ago. So that's the analysis that we've done thus far. I understand that we have received another email asking us to investigate further. There's I just received an email today about the lights on the building itself over by the dumpster that we'll be investigating into that. And the other item is I will talk with the manufacturer and the developer to see if shields can be placed on some lights. I think that if that's the case, if shields can be placed and we can maintain a level of security and safety on site and within the parking lot, then we'll have them do that. And then also, alternatively, the 35 arborvitae, green giant arborvitae trees that were installed as part of the developer overstepping their bounds as far as their limits of disturbance. They've been installed. We've confirmed that they were placed at the top of the hill. And so they're going to provide a buffer as well in years to come as they fill out and grow. And there's a full 25-foot buffer, landscape buffer on the caddis side of the development that will be installed. So short of that, I'm not sure what else can be done. The evidence that's been presented to us has been that the developer is meeting the requirements of the ordinance.
And that was in the data, so that's the key. I just want to make sure that, since we hear about it all the time, that it's addressed. And then the last question, I know we got the land development application materials for Prickett Preserve. I'm not trying to get into details, but I'm wondering if we've established some general schedule yet for what that might look like, just to get a general idea if it's too soon, or if that might be something we could look at hearing fairly soon.
But we'll work on that. I mean, there's a 90-day clock that's ticking according to the MPC. So, we'll do a variety of things internally from that we've instituted. So for example, there's escrow posted. All of the consultants will be given a certain dollar amount, not to stop at, but to notify us. So there's not any hiccups if that escrow gets depleted, that we're working on a deficit. At the same time, in doing that, we'll start establishing some benchmark times as far as when it would go to the planning commission, when we need to have reviews back. Everything has been distributed. We got that Monday. So, we'll start to establish that, Dan. It's a good question. And we'll start to have some timelines, some general timelines at this point, understanding that when the 90-day clock, when we have to get to the planning commission and work our way back. So you all are in the loop on that.
And are we having, obviously all of our professionals are fully engaged in this. Are we also getting comments from the applicable, I'll say it that way, advisory boards and commissions to get some of their feedback too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll move into the agenda items. If you'll remember, we had talked a couple of weeks ago about our intention to submit a grant application for the Multimodal Transportation Fund for 2 projects. One was for the Woodside Road Bike Path project. And so that requires a resolution to be submitted. And so we're asking for approval of a resolution number 2423 for the Multimodal Transportation Fund grant for the Woodside Road Bike Path grant application for $453,000.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Good.
Mr. Lewis makes a second. Any discussion?
Do we have to put any money into that to put the application in, or if we do, how much?
So we don't have to put, we have a match that was set aside, or we have money set aside for this project previously. I believe that was $120,000. Kurt, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So
25, I think, but yeah, you're in the range.
yeah. So
But the question, Andy, though, so obviously, Dan, there's some prep time that Remington Vernick has given us to submit these. I don't know that there's an application fee. Is there an application fee with that, Andy, like 500?
yeah, it's $500.
Yeah, so there'll be some upfront costs with preparation of that, probably totaling a few $1,000s at max total. But like Andy said, as far as the grants go themselves with the ramps, we're not proposing a match with the bike trail. We are, because that was the intent of the 0.24 mils at the time, was for this. So yes.
And this, just to refresh my memory here, I apologize. The 453 covers what percentage of the overall cost?
So if you'll remember, we received a previous grant for the design and land acquisition and bidding of this project. And that required a 15% match from the township. So this 453,000 would be strictly for construction. So 453 plus 125, it's looking
578.
Yeah, well, 578. No, but he asked about the percentage, and that's roughly 75.
Dan's a smart guy.
I took off my shoes so I could count to 20. Don't worry. But no, I just want to make sure that it's still where we were talking about, and that design where it gets us, it covers all of Woodside, and it goes.
It covers the previous sketch that we had discussed years back, where it goes from basically the driveway at the golf course down to the connection to the canal.
Yeah, so it's the north side of Woodside, sort of kind of across the Merrick, if I remember correctly, or the golf course, and then goes all the way to. Does it include the eastern portion of Woodside that's east of Taylorsville towards the canal bridge, or does it stop at the corner?
No, it includes the portion that goes east of Taylorsville down to the canal towpath.
Okay, and then Fred, you brought it up last meeting, I think it was, to keep pushing on the bridge, which would be a separate issue, but it would connect to what the bridge we're looking to get installed there, right, at some point.
To me, that's language that we're going to put into the application, because I think that that's what makes this project attractive, is
Absolutely.
that it is a central key piece in connecting all of these recreational opportunities, and even connecting to a bridge that could go into New Jersey. So
yeah, connectivity is a huge buzzword in that world. So anyway, thank you for clarifying that. It's been a while since I've asked you too many questions about that. So thanks.
So just so you know, because I have to do a math problem. So 78% is the amount that's covered by a grant. But I also want to point out for anybody watching, the 22% that's essentially our responsibility is money that we already have in hand and that has been specifically set aside. It's not been spent. It's earmarked and sitting in the Recreation Capital Fund right now. So there would be no new local tax dollars required to bring this to fruition. We already have all of it sitting there.
Any other comment? You did make a motion, right? I forget. Okay. Any public comment, Monica, on this resolution?
No public comment.
Okay. Hearing no further comment on the motion, all those in favor signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
One recusal, 401.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Next agenda item would be the approval of the resolution number 2424 for the Multimodal Transportation Fund grant for the ADA ramp improvements grant application for $307,615. This is for ADA ramp improvements on for roadways that are included in the next 2 years of the road program, tentatively, I would say. This is something that PennDOT.
You want to get the motion out before you talk about it?
Sure. Yeah, sorry.
So
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Got a second by Ms. Bundy. Motion made by Ms. McCartney. Now we can go with the head. Go ahead.
No, sorry, I get ahead of myself sometimes. So this would be ADA ramp improvements that the township would have to complete anyhow as part of the road program. So the PennDOT, in providing funding for liquid fuels, requires that any upgrades to roadways would require them being ADA compliant as well. And so that's what the genesis of this project and this grant application is. And so that's where this comes from. Our estimate, I believe there's approximately 32 ramps. And our estimate is based on the prices that we've received over the last 2 years of quantities and costs for similar work.
Any comments, questions? Monica, is there any public comment?
You're on mute, Monica.
She stepped out. There's no public comment.
Okay, great. Hearing no further comment, we'll call the question. All those in favor of approving a resolution number 2424, signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Backel, for your report.
Thank you.
Item number 10, project updates. You see before you a list of current township projects and various forms of comments on each project. Anyone have any questions or comments on the projects? Mike, if you're there, does anybody want to comment on the township projects?
No, there's no public comment.
Great.
Fred, it's not technically a township project, but I'm wondering, do we have an update on the Big Oak Road paving? I haven't been over there, so I haven't seen where we're at with it, or where PennDOT's at with it. I'm sorry.
They're in the initial stages at the moment. I don't have an update. Our traffic engineer's obviously been communicating with them. But I can't give you an update at this very moment. Maybe Andy knows.
Just because I was in the neighborhood and happened to be driving through. So when I drove through on Tuesday, they had, so the project is to mill and overlay Big Oak Road. So they're milling the entire stretch of roadway from Oxford Valley Road east. And then they'll come back and pave from Oxford Valley Road east. They were up to Stony Hill Road with milling operations on Tuesday, yesterday.
And related to that, and Chief, this might actually be up your alley here, in terms of when they're paving, if they have to shut anything down or redirect traffic or anything like that, is there anything that we need to make, and I think Chief's video froze, is there anything that we should be making our residents aware of that are watching in case they might not be aware ahead of time, just for safety purposes and if they're traveling? Anything that sticks out?
Oh, I'm sorry, Dan. It froze up when you started to talk. I didn't catch any of that.
I was just talking about Big Oak Road with the repaving. Is there anything from your perspective, from traffic safety perspective, that we should make our residents aware of during the repaving activities? Like if they're going to redirect traffic at all, if they're going to get slowed down, watch out for flaggers, stuff like that.
Yeah, if we see that something's backing up or there's a problem or motorists are confused, we'll get out there with the officers and redirect it and we'll put something out. But
Thanks,
I
Chief.
don't anticipate that there's a problem. They usually have a sufficient flaggers and they usually do a pretty good job.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay. Next item is manager's report. Mr. Ferguson.
Yeah, the item that's sitting on there, I apologize, that SALT consortium bid, that's not up for your consideration this evening. I'm sorry that's sitting there. But I would, I'm happy to take any questions. I want to make a point if I could, without going into too much detail, you know, with Brian's passing, I think something I think is needed to be said is, you know, if you talk to people, and I knew Brian in passing when we'd see him or when he'd come into the building, and my impression of him is the same thing that I hear of everybody else. I mean, I want to remind everybody, and I think this isn't said enough. Brian was a public servant. He did things. In public service, you know, a lot of times you do things that are underappreciated. You have an expectation to get something done, and people are upset if it's not done timely. Everyone's comments about Brian that I know are the same. Sweet guy, nice to everybody, wants to help anybody in the town that he can. And in 2020, I don't know that there's a higher form of flattery that you can pay to anybody more than that. So that's the way I'm going to remember him. And I know that's the way the guys and the staff that work with him are going to remember him. And I just want everyone to just remember in the end, when there's a lot of discussions and heated emotions, that you have people who are public servants out there 99.9% of the time doing the very best they can to serve people in the town. And Brian certainly was that. And that's all I have for my report.
Thank you, Kurt. I appreciate it very much. Item 13, zoning inspections and planning.
Mr. Chair, do you want item 12, the settlement agreement?
I'm sorry, say again?
Item 12, where we have the resolution regarding.
Oh, yeah, the solicitor. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just want to make sure that I hadn't missed something or I was.
No.
As far as the solicitor's report, there was no executive session tonight, so I have nothing to report in that regard. And if I could just take a moment to echo what Kurt said about Brian Derby. I knew Brian over 25 years. My boys started playing baseball when he was the PAA commissioner. And I got to know him through that and also through other interactions in the township. What everybody says about him and what Kurt just said is absolutely true. He was that guy, whether he was doing his public job, whether he was doing something else, starting the scholarship fund for PAA. He was thinking of other people almost all the time and was very pleasant about it. I mean, I know kids who've worked for the township in the summers. He was kind of the guy they all enjoyed being around. And that says a lot for a guy who's 64 years old who can still get young people to really enjoy your company. And from a personal note, he was a Paul Barrett, my father-in-law's funeral back in November of last year, and was a comforting presence in that time as well. So I'm going to miss him. I didn't know him as well as a lot of people did, but I knew him well enough that we could, talk about a lot of things. And I really appreciate his presence in so many ways. And he'll be missed. And I really feel for his family, given the circumstances. So thank you. Before you tonight is a resolution number 2422, authorizing a settlement letter agreement regarding a right-of-way acquisition for 1355 Edgewood Road. I'm going to try to condense this, but the history of this actually dates back to 1986, speaking of time. And it had to do with Steve and Helen Hines on a property at that location, which for years was not serviced by public sewer. And they had a septic system there. The township in 1986 filed a declaration of taking because it needed some of their land for possible right-of-way purposes for any road improvements or things like that along Edgewood Road. Fast forward to 1996, a settlement agreement was executed between the township and the Hineses, whereby the township would acquire that right away for a certain amount of money. But there was also a reservation in the agreement that if there was any type of non-routine maintenance along the road in that property in that area, that the Hineses would be provided, excuse me, service of public sewer. Fast forward to I guess last year, there was a house that was being improved, and the public sewer was being provided to that house. I just, as it was their right and their prerogative, hired an attorney who brought the matter to the attention of the township. And my partner, Barbara Kirk, then was able to negotiate a settlement whereby the Hineses would be provided, and they are provided, a public sewer access. They also have a grinder pump, but in exchange for that, the township now has a free and clear easement for that property. So again, there's a few more details involved, but the purpose is a longstanding legal dispute has been resolved. I think for the benefit of everyone, frankly, if the township had been on the hook for any costs from 1996 forward, it would have cost a lot more than what you see before you. So we would just ask then that based upon that representation, unless you have other questions, that a motion be made to accept resolution number 2422 as described.
I move to accept resolution 2422 as described.
Motion made by Mr. Lewis. Do I hear a second? Mr. McCartney seconds. Any discussion from the board?
Fred, I have to add just one question, Mr. Trulove again, and does this potential connection in any, or the whatever we vote on tonight, affect any of the neighbors by any chance? And they were built. There's a few on. I think there are a few on septic nearby that are not on.
Yeah, the one I know is connected. The one property that's just east of there. So I believe the two. I don't know as a fact, but I believe that the two to the east of theirs are now both connected. I may not know that positive, but I think that's the case. Is that correct, Kurt?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Okay. The reason I ask, and I didn't realize the address, is I just looked this up as we're talking on the parcel thing. My neighbor actually owns 1337 Edgewood. So it's more of a question of whether or not I should recuse myself or be able to vote on this. 1337 is a couple of properties away, but it's in the same boat.
that unless it doesn't sound like there's any pecuniary benefit to you, if there's just a personal relationship, that does not require recusal.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And just for everybody's benefit, reference, the Harris property, which is the one property that's been attempted for years to be developed, was going to be the linchpin for a lot of these sewers to be connected. But as the years have gone by, applications have been considered and never pursued. So this is actually a good way of accomplishing this without having to wait for the Harris tract to be developed, which may or may not ever occur. So anyway.
Any other comments from the board? Monica, is there any public comment?
There's no public comment on this.
Okay, in that case, all those in favor of resolution 2422 being approved, signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
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 5-0. Thank you very much. Anything else, Mr. Trulove?
If you just want me to go to the next items, first under 13A zoning inspections and planning, the development agreement for Caddis should be deferred to another meeting. The developer and their attorney are looking at the development agreement now, but it's not in a position yet to be considered by the board for approval. We anticipate that it probably will be considered or ready for consideration at the October 7th meeting. However, subsection B, resolution 2425 approving the sewer facilities planning module for the Caddis property, it should be on the should be considered. Mr. Majewski sent me an email later in the day today. I think the board received a copy too, that the planning modules were reviewed and approved by Ebert Engineering and the Planning Commission. No comments received by the public. The entire planning module, including the resolution, is then forwarded to the DEP for approval. Joe Chenard, who's the other person who's part of the planning module program here, is actually waiting a sewer to be connected by Caddis. So unless there's any other questions, it sounds like all the professionals and all the appropriate boards have done the due diligence, and it is ready and appropriate for board approval tonight, unless Kurt or anybody else has any questions or comments.
Dave, quick question since, sorry, Fred, do you mind if I ask Dave a question?
Is it going to be within the motion, or should we just?
I think it's separate. I just,
Okay. Sure.
the only thing I want to make sure is that as we look to consider this, is that there's nothing in the development agreement that could negatively impact or change the sewage facility planning module. That's the only.
They're coordinated. It's a good question, but they are coordinated documents. So that's, I mean, they reference one another and certainly consider one another as part of the overall finalization of the agreement. So.
Okay, I just want to make sure that if we change anything in the other one, doesn't hurt this one. That's all. Thank you.
Sure.
So I will entertain a motion for approval of resolution 2425.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Ms. McCartney makes the second. Any further comments? Monica, is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Hearing no further comment, all those in approval of passing resolution 2425 signify by saying aye. Raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's all I have.
I appreciate it, Mr. Trudeau. We'll go to item 14, public comment, general public comment on non-agenda items. Monica, is there anybody on the phone?
Yes, Sue is on the line.
Hi, Sue. Give your full name, address, and make your comment.
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Sure.
Great. Sue Herman, RRTS, PO Box 285, Newtown, PA. At the September 10th Mercer County Freeholders meeting, the board approved several airport-related resolutions, despite serious concerns expressed by citizens during public comment that occurred just prior to voting. Approval of these resolutions continues the reckless, unchecked expansion of TTN. We want to reiterate that the freeholders' actions will not only likely cause irreparable harm to the residents, businesses, and communities of Mercer County, but will also likely cause irreparable harm to Bucks County residents, businesses, and communities, and millions of people who get their residential drinking water from the Delaware River. As you know, we're concerned about the release of poisonous contaminants into surrounding tributaries in the Delaware River, including PFOS, VOCs, and mercury known to be present at the former Naval Air Warfare Center. PFAS contamination of drinking water is linked to harming children's neurological development, kidney cancer, and testicular cancer. In RRTS's September 10th public comments to the freeholders, we gave them several written testimonies and written comments that were formally submitted in August 2020 to the New Jersey Clean Air Council and the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. These included written testimonies for the July 2020 New Jersey Clean Air Council public hearing that were submitted by Congressman Fitzpatrick, Senator Senciro, Representative Warren, the Lower Makefield Township Board of Supervisors, Trenton Skies, Bram, RRTS, and Mercer County medical doctor and concerned resident, Dr. Deborah Baseman. And we also included written comments for the 2020 Water Quality Monitoring and Assessment Report that were submitted by the Lower Makefield Township Board of Supervisors, BRAM, and RRTS. We thank the LMT Board for your two submissions. Tonight, we ask that this board take the time to read the aforementioned testimonies and comments, which will attach to our written comment for tonight's meeting. We also ask the LMT Board to send a formal written communication to the Executive Director of the DVRPC stating A, that you vigorously and formally oppose all current and proposed expansion or renovation projects at TTN, and B, that you implore the DVRPC to re-examine its plans to make TTN a booming airport and reprioritize the importance of clean water to the region as one of the primary goals.
15
We'll
seconds.
now submit this public comment in 3 emails addressed to Dr. Weiss and the full Board of Supervisors, Solicitor Truelove, and Mr. Ferguson. We ask that the addressees acknowledge receipt of the 3 emails during the meeting. We also ask that you include the 3 emails and all attachments in the public record for tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Appreciate your comments.
You're welcome.
Anybody else, Monica?
Yes, Fred is on the line.
Hi, Fred. Give your full name, address, and make your comment.
Hi, Fred Childs, 1345 Lexington Drive. I want to thank Supervisors Blundy and McCartney for their thoughtful deliberations during this year's proceedings on the sewer system and overlay zoning issues. They have demonstrated their dedication to making decisions that are in the long-term beneficial interest of the township's financial health, which is their primary duty, along with what they see as the best long-term interest of the majority of residents. Both supervisors care deeply about Lower Makefield, are well respected in this community, and have volunteered over many years for various local sports teams and other community activities. As supervisors, they and the others on the board spend countless hours in meetings, events, preparation, and responding to constituents while pursuing their professional careers and family lives during these difficult times. Both Supervisor Blundy and McCartney have been serving this community with integrity and distinction, and they should be respected for that. It is shameful that some are attempting to unjustly smear and denigrate their character. The facts are that a large majority of the contributions to the Blundy and McCartney campaign were from residents and from the two candidates' friends, family members, and themselves, none of whom had any business before the township. Under current law, it is the right of every individual citizen to contribute to any candidate or any duly registered political action committee or PAC as they choose within the limits of the applicable campaign finance laws. It is disingenuous to insinuate or allege that Supervisor Blundy's and McCartney's work and decisions on this board have been unduly influenced by someone who donated some lesser amount to some other PAC, or that they are not properly and responsibly performing their official duties on behalf of the township and their constituents, the residents. If you want to prevent or limit specific individuals' rights to make political contributions, then change the campaign finance laws. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Childs, for your comments. Is there anybody else, Monica?
Yes, Robert is on the line.
Okay. Hi, Robert. Go ahead, make your comment.
Robert Abrams, 652 Teach Drive. I want to thank the last caller for his political public service announcement and completely understand that Mr. Lewis, when he was asked about his campaign contributions, seemed to know everybody that was contributing to his campaign, which any good elected official should know. But apparently, Mr. McCartney and Ms. Blundy there just didn't know, just didn't care, just wherever the money came from. The money from the overlay in the campaign report signed by Cynthia Weiss that I saw apparently all come out of Ivyland, where DeLuca is. Ivyland bought and paid for Lower Makefield Township because they don't want the garbage that they're bringing into Lower Makefield Township in Ivyland. It's really that simple. Mr. Ferguson, since the day you walked in here, the residents of this community have continued to lose goods and services. Everything that's being done is costing the residents in money, in historical value, in property value, and in community pride. I don't consider any of that to be any reason for you to stay here anymore. I don't care if it's you or it's anybody else. The idea of a township manager is to improve the quality of the lifestyle of its residents. From having a recycling yard operating for the benefit of the residents, it's now opened whenever you feel like it, and not very much. It's a disservice to the community at this point. Now we're borrowing money again. We were better off when we couldn't borrow money anymore. That way, we wouldn't dig the hole any deeper. And if you really think that Aqua is getting into this deal because it's to the benefit of Lower Makefield and it's for Lower Makefield to make money, I'm laughing at you. Because you didn't post it, You didn't give the opportunity for public comment to it, and you didn't give the public the opportunity to digest it, which is the problem with the transparency of the Board of Supervisors chair. It's always a wham bam, thank you, ma'am. Just put it up there, put up an argument or two, and then get the two little sheep, Blondie and McCartney, to follow the lead and raise their hand. The amount of money that they received was astronomical from what I saw. I saw a contributor there from New Hope who hasn't lived here in 25 years. I know him personally. This is a disgrace what's going on here. Now, Mr. Weiss needs to get the H out of here because he doesn't own any property. And Mr. Ferguson, you need to go for the same reason. What I heard here.
Thank you, Mr. Abrams. Your 3 minutes were up. Any other further comment, Monica?
No further public comment.
Thank you. There is one other item. We'll go to discussion items, but this also has to do with public comment. I received an email from Lisa Gage, and I'm going to read it into the record now, and then we'll have the discussion on it. This is Lisa speaking. I connected with Helen Heinz of the LMT Historical Commission regarding the upcoming ceremony at the Slate Hill Cemetery on September 26th, and how the African American Museum of Bucks County will be using her research on the African American soldiers buried there to produce a video. The AAMBC is requesting a small donation towards the cost of the video. As it is an LMT/Historical Commission event, it would be good programming for the LMT Cable Government Access Channel and for the Community tab on the LMT website. The goal of this mini documentary is to have wide distribution in the Bucks County school systems as part of their history curriculum. The video would also be on the AAMBC website, info.aambc.org. Visit the Bucks County website and link to the township and social media outlets if desired. There would be acknowledgement thanking the LMT Historical Commission and the Board of Supervisors at the end of the video in the credits. The AAMBC is a 501c3 registered nonprofit organization, and they are incurring some huge expenses to renovate their new building that was leased to them by the county. We will be interviewing a few African-American vets from the area prior to the 1 p.m. start, as well as a few local students and young adults from the area. The idea is to break up the stories with some comments from present-day people. I think it is an opportune and especially timely moment to establish a partnership between the museum and the township. According to Dr. Heinz and the Historical Commission, there is a lot more African-American history in Lower Makefield Township, including abolitionist meeting locations, Underground Railroad locations, freed black men's houses, etc., which may be spotlighted by the museum in the future. The museum is to uncover the untold stories of African Americans in Bucks County, and there are many yet to tell. The amount of this request is for $500, and it is my understanding that if it or a portion of it may be able to be funded by the Historical Commission's small budget. Thank you in advance, Lisa Gage. So what I put up for the board, and I did send an email out or a message out last week, if the board would be willing to authorize up to $500 for helping the AMBC fund this video.
Fred, I'd be honored to make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
A second by Ms. Blondie. Any discussion? Mr. Grenier?
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. I'm wondering, Kurt, this is a question for you, I think. Is this something that the town, I guess we might have a couple options depending, the township just write a check, very simple, or, we've done things, when I was on the EAC, we funded things through the EAC budget because we had, I forget what we had per year or whatever it was, but it was in the range of what Ms. Gage is asking us about. Do you have a recommendation for how we fund it? Because I do think it's a good idea. I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on that.
The relevant budget item, because you know we do budget different amounts of money for various committees. For the historical group is $500. The year to date on that is $138. So, you know, again, if you're going to strictly follow the budget line item, there's the difference there. But going over by $100, you know what I mean? In the scheme of things, it's easily absorbed. And, you know, I would suggest, and again, if you're going to make the motion with whatever it is, that's where we'll assign it.
But we don't need to put that in the motion, correct? You'll just figure it out for us, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll let you know where I put it. You just would need to direct me as far as what the payment is going to be. Then we'll cut the check and we'll assign it appropriately. And I'll make sure I point it out to you during budget time when we give the year-to-dates.
Someone I suggested up to $500. Is that your motion, Mr. McCartney?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I'm sorry, just for clarification, is up to 500, 500?
500, yes.
Up to and including
Up
500.
to including $500.
$1 is up to 500. I just want to, okay.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Is there any public comment, Monica, on this topic?
Actually, I guess not to exceed 500, probably the
Not to
better one.
exceed 500.
Yeah, there we go.
As amended, thank you.
There isn't any public comment on this.
So since there's a motion made in the second, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Very good. Thank you very much. Is there any other discussion items before the board that anybody wants to bring up? Very good. Go to supervisor reports. I have nothing to report. Mr. Grenier?
Yeah, the Electric Reliability Committee, I know we're going to meet next month, Kurt. I don't recall the time or day, but in preparation for that meeting, the chair of that committee, Mr. Pingham, sent me a letter that I hadn't personally received, Kurt, that was addressed. I don't know if it went hard copy or via email, because I didn't have an email forwarded to me. I just got a PDF of the letter dated June 3rd, 2019. It's actually quite a good letter. If you don't have it, then I can distribute to you and the board. But it gives some very nice background on the history of the ERC as we look at some of our boards and committees, some of their goals and some of their suggestions for specific topics that were discussed at a meeting in one of our meetings in the spring of 19. And they put this letter together. Unfortunately, I never got a copy of myself. So they also copied for reference, or so everyone knows, they also copied I see Representative Perry Warren, who responded with the note. I can send that along too, saying that he's in favor of this stuff, but it's very basic. Also related to that, we had I don't know if we had a fair number of comments, concerns, both when we did our last ERC interview, as well as a few comments on Facebook about Hidden Oaks. So it related to ERC, but I went and sort of retrieved the data from PICO on the Hidden Oaks development from basically Superstorm Sandy on. So anyone from Hidden Oaks that's interested, post Sandy, during Sandy, as you probably all remember, unfortunately, as to why you were out of power for 4 straight days. I remember myself, I think I was 7 or 8 at that point. And then post Sandy, there were 2 outages in 28, both at the same week, first week of March 2018, for a couple days there. And then you had 3 separate, you've had 3 outages this year alone, 2 or 3 of which are in PICO's top 10. So it's been a rough year in Hidden Oaks. There's been a total of 8 days of no outages. I'm sorry, 8 days of outages, including Sandy, 4 of which in addition to Sandy, if you're interested. And then PICO has said that they've, since in 2020, I don't know the specific locations, but they have done a fair amount of tree trimming and replaced some equipment in the area. So hopefully your reliability will be much better, and none of those hurricanes those 5 hurricanes that are in the Atlantic will come our way and cause more trouble. If that being said, anyone that has any interest in looking at your outage history, I do it for my own house every now and again. You can get that information from Pico. If you need some help, I'd be happy to help you out. Just shoot me an email at my township email address. But anyway, thought it was interesting data. That's it for me.
Thank you, Dan. Ms. Blunty?
I have nothing. Thank you.
Mr. McCartney?
I have nothing to report.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes, the Historical Architectural Review Board met on Monday, September 14th, and they completed review of agenda item involving 1674 Edgewood Road, demolition of Quill House. They voted unanimously to reject that proposal. The Zoning Hearing Board met last night and was able to resolve Appeal 19-1846, which has been a long-standing appeal from 2019, amicably with Ms. Galvis, which has been a long-standing one. They were also able to resolve 2 pools, which was good that could be addressed for those folks, and a fence issue for another member of the community. And that is my report.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Lewis. Is there any other business before the board? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. See you on the 7th.
Good evening.
Stay well.